Can we just stop talking about AI already? Well, no, because it's all around us and it's only going to get more and more into our daily lives. And what is Agentic AI? What does it really mean? How will this wave literally change the way we work? What impact will it have not only on your jobs, but also your daily lives? In episode 95 of GTWGT, we talked to co-founder and chief product officer at Integrail, Anton Antich. With $10 million in seed funding just secured and backing from Ratmir Timashev, Integrail is leading the charge in no-code AI-powered business automation. So let's keep this conversation going around AI. This is episode 95 of Great Things with Great Tech with Anton Antich from Integrail AI. Let's get into it. Hey Anton, welcome to the show. It's great to have you. So look, before we dive into the world of Agentic AI and what that means for everybody in this world moving forward, and before we talk about Integrail, I'm really interested in yourself. We've got a little bit of a crossover, obviously, at Veeam software, but take us back to your early days, your love of computing, where that came from, and how you came to be, the co-founder of Integrail.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony, for having me. And this is a dangerous question because I'm not getting younger, and as people get older, they tend to, be nostalgic about the youth and stuff.
I love nostalgia.
Yeah. But yeah, no, actually, funnily enough, I wanted to be a nuclear physicist since age of 6.
Wow.
Because I had an aunt who was a physics teacher, and she really got me into it. So that's who I almost became, actually. And I always loved, research. I majored in physics, but eventually, due to mostly commercial considerations, I moved into the software world.
Yeah.
But obviously, physics and programming development, they're quite connected. So that allowed me to actually launch my career as a developer at some point after the university. But then after some years, I moved to the business side of things. So.
Wow. Yeah. Well, okay. So just small aspirations when you were young to become a nuclear physicist and stuff like that. It's pretty crazy. I mean, it's pretty cool though. So you had an auntie who was doing it, and you're Russian, and in that world, like that's obviously a big thing, right? Like technology, that thing is huge in Russia, to be able to lift yourself up and become something significant, right? So it must have been a great feeling. So what did make you switch? I mean, I know I hated physics. I flunked physics actually in year 10. So I loved it, but I wasn't any good at it. So it's actually quite interesting that, I've become interested in coding later in life, but I don't think they should mix. I love space, all that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
Where did you start? Like in terms of software, did you start as a developer in any particular company? Were you doing any specific platform, or were you just doing generic stuff?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was actually doing some development while I was still doing physics research, because there's a lot of stuff you need to calculate and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that obviously gave me some experience. But then, yeah, it's a connected question as well, because I finished university in the year 99 or so, or 98. And that was not a good time in Russia, because Soviet Union sort of broke down, and there was an economic crisis, and working as a physicist did not really pay your bills.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was a dot-com boom.
Yep.
And during that time, companies first discovered this offshore outsourcing thing. And of course, everybody thinks about Indian companies, but actually at that time, Russian companies were quite popular as well. So there were many of those actually in Novosibirsk, where I studied. So I just went to one of those companies called Novosoft, and I just started coding stuff for the .com companies. So we were creating like online stores before Amazon and this type of thing. Of course, everybody who we worked for died out, but it was a good experience.
Good experience. Yeah, great time to kind of do that. Like again, I was flunking university during the .com boom and trying to work out what I wanted to be, but I remember it all happening. I mean, I was more interested in playing computer games, but anyway, I digress. So you ended up an interesting path. Like if you think about like you were at Veeam for a while, but before that you're at VMware. So you obviously got into that sort of operational side of things. So talk a little bit quickly through that, what you did at Veeam, and then because I think it's obviously connected to Ratmir and what he did at Veeam, and obviously Ratmir is a big part of Integrail as well. So talk a little bit about what you were doing at Veeam and how that prepped you for this next step after you left Veeam a few years ago.
Yeah, it was Veeam. I mean, like you just mentioned, you were part of it as well. That was probably the most amazing story, career-wise, and just building something cool and big. And being a part of that was definitely a great experience. And for those who don't know, Veeam grew from 0 to 1 billion in revenue in about 11 years, I want
Hmm.
to say. And actually, there's a funny story behind it as well. So I was uh, working for Microsoft before VMware.
Yeah.
And when I decided to switch to VMware, I met Ratmir right away because he founded Veeam in 2007, I think, and I went to VMware in 2007. So the guys who worked at Microsoft, they looked at me as I was crazy because VMware was a pretty small company at the time, and they were like,
Yeah.
"How do you leave Microsoft and go there?" And here I meet the guy who says, "We're going to be doing backup for VMware, so for this small company that not many people know."
Hmm.
And he says, "We're going to be 1 billion in 10 years." And I was like, polite. I didn't want to argue with crazy people. So I said, "Okay, good luck." But then obviously we became friends. We exchanged like ideas on how to grow the company. I was with VMware for about 3 years.
Yeah.
During all this time, we were friends with Ratmir. Then eventually, yeah, I moved to Veeam and switched more to operational roles because I did enjoy kind of processes, defining things more formally, thinking strategically about what we need to do, where we need to go, etc., etc. But Veeam, I mean, it's you know, it's impossible to describe it in 5
Yeah.
minutes. Like every
Of
year we had
course.
a new set of challenges, and it was just a great ride altogether.
Yeah. So after Veeam, you went off on your own, still staying close with Ratmir, obviously. And so what did you do in the time between leaving Veeam and creating Integral? And then let's talk a little bit about how Integrail came to be. What was the spark? What was the idea for the company?
Yeah, so actually, my physics roots, it was genuinely what I loved doing, actually. So I actually missed research and I tried to follow more in the space of computer science and mathematics eventually, but they are quite connected anyway. So after Veeam, I made a pretty good exit, so I could take a break. So I took a break actually. I was doing some looking around in what was going on in the world. There were no clear waves yet, but I always liked AI. I read a bunch of classical books, so I
Yeah.
tried to follow the research. And eventually, when LLMs, so large language models, started to appear, that was definitely something interesting. So I invested in a couple of companies that were doing something in this area. Actually, one of them I joined also as a COO and worked with them for about 2 years. They were doing first machine translation, but then they switched to LLMs and sort of expanded their stack. So that was a nice experience. But then it was still, it was kind of all intermediate because basically after Veeam, I didn't see myself doing something full time. I just
Yeah.
took some time to figure out what is interesting. But yeah, when GPT-3 appeared and it started to become clear that we can take this actually very old notion of agentic AI because it's been in the AI world forever. Everybody started talking about it only last year, but
Hmm.
it's a very old concept actually. It's just that LLMs give you a very good way to start building those agents.
Okay.
So at the time, we were building another company where Ratmir became an investor. I started this company with my old partner from VMware, Marek Shviret. And it was completely unrelated to AI or even infrastructure world. But we started experimenting with AI agents in frames of that
Okay.
company. And then very quickly I realized that actually building a platform that allows to create any type of agent I want would be really cool. I just basically wanted to play with agents. I was reading research papers.
Yeah.
I wanted to have agents for myself. And that was sort of the prerequisite to creating Integrail. Um,
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so a lot of companies I speak to, you know, their founding story or their genesis is basically from somewhere unexpected, right? Like they're doing something else, they're working on something that is completely different, and then there's a little spark of something within that,
Right.
and then from that something grows because you realize, hey, maybe this is what I should be doing. So this was the spark for, you know, putting together a few loves of yours and then working out exactly what you wanted to do and thinking that you had something that you could take to market and that people could actually get some benefit out of.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And also, it's a bit of a funny story, but like we were just discussing, Ratmir Timashev, who's Veeam's founder, he's really a great entrepreneur, but in general, a great personality. So
Absolutely.
I was meeting him after leaving Veeam as well. So I tried to sell some startup to him or some startup idea, and I was coming with this, with that, with this, and he was never interested. It's like, no,
Yeah, good,
I
yeah.
don't care. But then as we started doing this AI stuff and I started writing about it on LinkedIn, he got interested. He called me, we brainstormed together, and basically that was when Integrail was born.
Yeah.
But in terms of inspiration, I just wanted to share because I think this is also interesting. I found
Yep.
one research paper where a team of scientists created an agent that explored Minecraft world. And
Oh, my son would
I
love
think,
this.
yeah.
My son is
So
addicted.
yeah, and they had some new really cool ideas there. And the most interesting that sort of stood out to me was that they built a library of skills for this agent, where every skill was generated in response to a certain, environment or whatever. And this way, this agent was kind of self-learning, and it became like the best player in Minecraft. So we
Wow.
decided, why don't we take this idea and just move it to the real world? And that's actually the kind of advanced AI agents that we're building, where each of them has a skill library which they're able to develop themselves, and this way they become more and more powerful. So
I
that
get it.
was
I
kind
get
of
it.
the original vision which we're coming back to right now.
That's pretty cool. I'll tell my son that literally I think he's playing Minecraft right now. So he's basically a bot himself anyways. He's really good at it. Let's talk about the name. Is there any significance to Integrail? The actual name? Or
No,
just a
I
cool
mean,
name?
yeah, it's just a wordplay that we integrate easily, and also there is AI in the name because it's integrate AIL,
Yeah.
so that's combining AI and integrations, and I
Yeah.
mean, the holy grail a little bit as well.
Yeah, I was going to
Uh,
say about that as well. That's what I was kind of like leaning
yeah.
towards. But no, it's pretty cool. Like, all right, it's all good. It's a good name anyway. So, you know, if we've talked about agents, we've talked about LLMs and what you're doing. So, what is Integral's main purpose? You know, from the point of view of what's the problem you're trying to solve for people and for businesses and organizations?
Yeah, that's I mean, that was my original inspiration that still continues. Basically, I believe that we had several big technological waves, as we all know, and we actually used it at VMware, and I think we used it at Veeam as well. They had this really nice slide where in IT there was invention of computers, then there was invention of internet, then there was virtualization, and that's it. There were like three big waves.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back in history, there was industrial revolution itself, like invention of the steam engine, and then the
Hmm.
Henry Ford, etc. So all of these waves really changed the way we do things quite significantly. This AI wave, in my strong conviction, people very much underestimate the way it will change how we do things. And maybe we'll touch upon some contrived examples of where we can come to. But basically, it's a huge wave. And I just wanted to, participate in that wave and enable people to create like AI helpers, because AI agents are basically AI helpers that they control. Not
Hmm.
some corporation gives you, because when a big, huge corporation gives you something, they want to make money on you. And I know it
Yeah.
sounds a bit naive because obviously we're building a business as well, but still, sort of in our DNA, we want to give people full control, that it is your AI. It acts in your interest. You know what's inside of it, you know how you build it. And so that we want to give people the ability to express their creativity by building those AI agents. And part of this inspiration also comes from success of Midjourney.
Yep.
That was the first company that was creating this text to image type of things, and they create really beautiful images. And I cannot draw. I draw like very terrible
Yeah, I'm
stuff, but
horrible as well. Horrible.
yeah, yeah. But still, like people are creative. If you give people the ability to create something and they want to create. So I really love Midjourney. I type some prompt and
Yep.
I get a very beautiful picture. So we kind of want to do the same with agents eventually. We're not
Interesting.
there yet because now you need to, move the boxes and connect them.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But in this version, we are getting much closer. Just you write a description and the agent is getting generated for you. So it's still in that sort of general direction.
I think that's a really good connection and analogy to use because how creative can you be? And I know that people that have got some slight level of creativity, put that together with what LLMs and chatbots are able to do through prompting, it's unlimited, right? It's limitless because if you've got enough in here to be able to get some information and tell the AI to do something through your fingers and through the chatbot, and then if the AI is capable enough, like you said, it's changed the world. It already is, right? Like I know that I've been working this week on a little like custom built SaaS application that I'm going to have because nothing that I've used in my role does everything that I want. So I thought to myself, why can't I just build something with a better help from AI as an example, right? So I fully believe that this is possible. And the difference there, which I think where Integrail can actually help, is that in myself, I have enough capability to be able to use code, use Python, compile a web server, do this, do that, and kind of put it together myself. But the majority of people don't have that. So from what I see, Integrail is enabling to give them a platform to not have to worry about too much of the ground knowledge that they need and just start building the cool stuff to help them and make their lives more efficient. Is that kind of the idea of the platform?
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, not just that, because I mean, as we discussed, I also have a developer background, and
Hmm.
I mean, I was always sort of interested in solving difficult problems. And actually, I recently finished a book on Haskell language. So, I mean, those who know, this is a functional language in which all of the research in computer science is taking place. The problem is the learning curve is a bit steep, but I really loved its connection to mathematics, and I tried to, express a certain way of learning it. So I am pretty deep into computer science and development, and
Yeah.
I understand that developers like to code. However, I can bet, like with any developer, I will be developing an agent using Integrail. They will be developing, using Python and stuff. I will be 10 times faster at least. And
There you go.
I like coding, but it's just so much easier. I mean, if you
Yes.
can change things here, there, move stuff around, why?
This concept
Because
of
again,
no code. Yeah.
yeah,
No
go
code
ahead.
is getting yeah, no code is getting popular, right? And I've seen this more and more in the last 12 months. It's almost like the industry's gone away. Well, not completely, but the fundamental idea is that if you can make something simple in a drag and drop interface that does the legwork for you, you're
Right.
just going to become more and more efficient. That's what I wanted to say. Sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah. 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 Uh, yeah, exactly. But also, what one was my other thought? Um, Drag and drop interface and no code. Okay, it'll come back to me. Let's
That's
just
okay.
move on.
That's okay. Let's talk about agentic AI first before we get into the interface, before we get into the components that make it up. Agentic AI is something that probably came up, 12, 18 months ago. People started to talk about agents, and all of a sudden it was agentic AI, a fancy way of saying that. The term we're hearing more and more. So, how would you define it in simple terms? And
Mhm.
why is it so important for individuals and organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, we had lots of arguments internally with, including with Ratmir, on this topic because I'm a bit of an old school. Like I said, actually, agents in AI has been forever. It's if you read the classical book, Artificial Intelligence: The Modern Approach, I think that now they have the fourth iteration of that book out. The first one that included something about deep learning, but they started probably 25 years ago. So all they talk about is agents. And I mean, in essence, an agent is a very simple thing. It's basically someone who can understand the outside world and take an action in it. So the best example to think about agents is as humans. We are agents. because we can understand the world around us using our senses. We can process what's happening. We have some knowledge, we have skills, we can make decisions, and then we can make a change in the outside world using, hands and
Hmm.
mouth or whatever else we want. So with AI agents, specifically when we move to LLMs, it's pretty much the same. It's not just the chatbot to which everybody is now familiar, but
Yeah.
also you give kind of a brain built out of LLMs. It can be one LLM, it can be several LLMs that help each other reason, that correct each other, etc. There are different templates you can use, and we provide them as well. But in addition to this brain, you give them knowledge, which is your corporate sources, or the ability to search internet, or
Hmm.
just something custom you want to build. Anything like that can be made available to that LLM to make better choices, better decisions, better responses. And then the second most important part is you give it ability to perceive the outside world. So in our case, all kinds of software and web, the environment in which they live. But I mean, nobody prevents you from building an agent that works, for instance, with smart house. You just need to give some sensors that provide information, and
Yep.
it will be able to help you. So sensors to understand the information, and then tools to make changes in the outside world. And in our case, it's basically API calls through which you can update different systems. And also the beauty of LLMs and in general, generative AI in general is that, and this is actually a very new addition to Integrail just coming out last week, we finally created this, what we call universal API node, which allows you to connect to any system that has an API
Whoa.
automatically. You don't need to
Okay.
do anything. You just put documentation and you get a node that automatically does what you want. So this
Wow.
creates really unlimited stuff. You can connect to any system, get data, change data. So now literally the agents you can create are just limited by our imaginations. And
Wow.
sometimes we lack it. So we invite everybody who wants to have ideas to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean this is like automation on steroids. Like, it differs from traditional automation. And in our world of infrastructure, of code, automation was to do a certain task, but it was typically only to do one task, right? A very specific task. And typically you wrote that automation to do one thing and that was it. And then you kind of stepped away, let it do its thing. And it never evolved. You had to update it every now and again. This goes beyond that, because if you're able to create something that, and like I've seen, your platform allows you to connect to multiple LLMs with that node, which is, I see that as like an API proxy on steroids, right? Like if you've got a little node, that I'm really interested to take a look at that, by the way, and really look at it. 'Cause already I'm thinking about all the ideas that I can do, and that's the great thing about this. How does the role of like vector memory, RAG, retrieval augmented generation? I mean, obviously that's part of it. So how does that come together with agents to make someone again more efficient? I mean, you mentioned the knowledge. Obviously, going out with the retrieval augmented generation, it's about getting outside knowledge, putting that in context with the LLM and with your prompts to make it smarter and more responsive to that.
Right.
But how do you equate that? Like in simple terms, when people talk about, we hear it all the time: vector memory, retrieval augmented generation, agents, operators. Like in context, what does that mean?
Right. Right. Yeah, this is a great question, and this is actually a very important question, which many people also don't realize. Like now, I see often in social media people saying something like, "Well, I asked ChatGPT this, and it told me this," and it just makes me cringe because it's a well-known fact that all LLMs so-called hallucinate, which means their architecture, the original paper where the architecture of all current LLMs was done, is called transformers.
Yes.
What they do, and they do very well, they transform one type of text to another type of text. So it can be structured, it can be unstructured, doesn't matter. They do this job amazingly. And there are very interesting consequences for this, which we can touch upon later. But it also creates this problem. Basically, again, this architecture just means that you put some symbols, some text as input, they have to produce output. There is no other way. So they will produce an output no matter what. Yes, you can give additional instructions, fine tune, etc., so that it tries not to deceive you specifically. But this creates a very big conundrum because if you are not an expert in some area, you can never be sure the answer it gives you by itself, is it correct or
Yes.
not?
Okay.
And if
Yes.
you are an expert, you don't need to ask in the first place. And it's like, okay, so what are they useless? No, they're not useless. And this is where RAG or retrieval augmented generation comes in. So basically, the way RAG works is that as part of input, there is no black magic. That there is nothing like crazy or rocket science. But you ask a question, but then as part of input, in the background, we give a certain document, a PDF file, or something from the web, or something that we found in our corporate database by converting first our documents to so-called vector representation because they allow to search much better. But the point is we put additional correct context as part of the input to the LLM. Then hallucinations virtually disappear because it uses this context as the primary source to provide an answer. So basically what people try to do now, they create such RAG approaches that puts the truthful, the good, the correct context as part of the LLM interacting with you, and then they provide a good answer. So this is sort of the way to overcome this hallucination issue.
Yeah.
The next step is you can also fine tune your LLMs, but that's advanced thing. And actually, I don't know, I think 95% of issues are solved via REC quite efficiently.
Yeah. And then there's the concept of the actual LLM itself, whether it be a local one or even the ones that are releasing. I think today with 4.5 got released to Pro on OpenAI. It's just like you said, it's getting quicker and quicker and more advanced.
Right.
The number of parameters that are in the model make a big difference in terms of the amount of knowledge that it has, the foundational knowledge. So maybe not hallucinate as much, but there's still going to be that level of hallucination because, to your point, that's exactly why they exist. They exist to take an input that they've been trained on and create something from a question, and they're not sure that they're correct, right?
Right.
So you always have to check it, and then adding the thing that made me think a little bit there is even though we inject real information or any information from any source, right? How does that make it less likely to hallucinate at the end? Is it because it knows that it's getting data to work with in that instance, or is it just something that helps it understand to not search too much for other bits and pieces to augment the information in the response?
Yeah, it also depends on the system prompt instructions that you give to it. But normally, yes, the immediate context, LLMs tend to treat with much higher priority than whatever they have learned internally. So even if the internal probabilistic architecture makes them to produce certain answer, they will take this as the correcting data, and so they tend to do something that's much more aligned to the immediate context. It's
Yeah,
also
yeah,
just
yeah.
the context of the I mean,
So
it's like we
go
were
ahead.
discussing with you previously. I think there is also analogy to humans. So there is all the knowledge I know I learned during my life. But then
Yep.
if you think about it, how much of this knowledge you don't even think, but it's based on false assumptions. Like you read a headline in some media that referenced maybe some report by British scientists, and you think this is true. But then maybe several reports came out that adjusted this data, or maybe even completely overturned it. You have no idea. You still think this is true.
Yes.
And
Yep.
sort of the thing that happens with LLM. They learned a bunch of stuff during training. They try to produce what they know based on this learning. But then if you talk to me and you ask me a specific question and I do research, I open a book, I read it, I find
Uh-huh.
papers, I put it kind of in my operating memory, right? And then I give you a response based on this knowledge that's fresh and new in my mind. This is kind of what RAG does. So
Yeah, that's an augmentation situation. Yeah. Let's move quickly to building AI applications is traditionally complex, right? Well, when I say traditionally, only the last few years because that's when it's really taken hold, but from a generative point of view. So what makes Integral's no-code studio different, and how does it sort of democratize this AI for businesses?
yeah, this is a great question because actually what we found is that it is difficult for people to break down what they want into a flow. So if a person knows how to break down the process they're working on, for instance, or their job description or something into a flow, like first I do this, I take some data from my CRM, then I read an email, then I make this decision. If they're able to do that, they would be able to build an agent very fast because it's basically one-on-one mapping. But what we found is that a lot of people struggle with that. So what we are trying to do now, we want to simplify our interface even further. We're actually using a lot of generation under the hood right now. Our new version comes out in May with the new architecture, and new UI is there as well. So basically there, we will not ask people to connect, specific fields to some specific fields, which can be a bit daunting. But we'll just say, okay, here is the first box. Read my last 10 emails. The second box, like sort them by, I don't know, date or whoever sent them. The second LLM box, do this and that. So basically just natural language sort of interaction with what you want to build. And even on top of that, we want to have some generative assistants to give people ideas, what is possible, which systems you can connect with, etc., etc. Basically, again, our big vision and the movement towards is simplifying as much as possible, and that's what we want to continue doing.
I was going to ask you, give me a sort of real world example, but you just have, like in terms of that. So the question that I've got to ask as we're running out of time, but I want to really ask this is, where does this leave humans? Like in terms of in 12 to 18 months, we talked about, maybe we can't go as far as 5 years because everything is moving so quickly. But if we're going to make everyone's life automated through agents, and I believe this is going to happen. Like people are just so leaned into this because what I've seen going to Microsoft conferences, listening to how people are talking about, the whole premise is based on people doing less, people being lazy, people, making their lives a little bit more comfortable, right? Like I think it touches a really interesting psyche in our human sense, this whole world, right? So where do you think, how far does this go? If you get agents right, if Integrail's mission succeeds, what are people's jobs going to look like?
Yeah, this is a great question, which a lot of people debate from different angles. I mean, to me, the way I see it is that AI agents are able to take out the boring, the mundane from your lives, from your jobs, because the first jobs we automate are really, data entry. I mean, it's demeaning to people. You take some PDF, you read it, you type it, and there is in corporations there is probably millions of jobs like this, but this can be done by AI agents very easily. So what we want to do, we want to free up humans for creative work, because still finding out and creating really new things, even though some people will argue with me, but still LLMs will not be better than humans on that. And this is where what is fulfilling, what is gratifying, and then we can solve difficult problems, we can make tough decisions, etc. And then we will have agents that do the grunt work for us. And it kind of,
Interesting.
if you know what you're doing, if you're willing to take that step, if you're willing to learn, yes, it requires some learning. It's not going to be easy. But if
Yeah.
you become that person and you have a team of agents working for you, you become 10 times more powerful, 100 times more powerful. So that's kind of the promise.
Yeah, I get that. I have had that answer and I've heard that response. I think a couple of episodes ago, I've had it even last year at some point. A similar response to automation makes us more efficient. AI, generative AI, and agents allows us to free up ourselves to become better at being more creative and actually being more forward thinking and
Yeah.
maybe even more technically advanced than ourselves because now again like you said we don't have to worry about the mundane. We can almost unlock the creativity that makes us think further ahead,
Right.
which potentially we don't get to do because we're so bogged down by all the
Yeah.
other stuff, right? So will that mean, and that creates a flywheel effect of, we're going to write more and more agents to make us more efficient. We become more efficient. We write more agents to create that to make it more efficient, and then so on. So it's actually an interesting trajectory that we head towards as humanity. I've heard all sorts of people talk about this in terms of where it's going with sentient and AI and AGI and whatnot. I think at the short term, your platform allows people to be really good and really efficient at their jobs, at those tasks, without having to know any coding, because that's the whole point of it. Having a no code drag and drop. And like you said,
Yeah.
you're even going to get to natural language interface to help them build that out, which is taking it one step further. I think that's really going to be helpful. Are there any industries that you're targeting specifically to start with? Is there any more? Is there any one industry that's paid more attention to you guys than any other that you've noticed already?
I mean, funnily enough, we have a bit of bias to financial industry,
Okay, makes
but
sense.
there is no specific reason behind it. I mean, the agents you can create are pretty horizontal, but we just probably had more interest from those guys for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you just like we didn't really talk about it. It's bad of me for doing this. Usually, I would say this straight away. The founding was only just last year, right? Like in September, roughly. I think
Yeah,
the
we
founding
launched
was.
end of September. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And then obviously, recently, as much as a week ago, when as this recording is done, Ratmir, who we talked about, co-founder and Veeam and entrepreneur and very successful and a great guy, you secured 10 million of seed funding, through that vehicle as well. So, and you also appointed a new CEO. So, talk a little bit about that and how that helps you in this next
Yeah.
phase.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great point because also you probably noticed there are lots of platforms that try to do similar things that we do.
Hmm.
Where we sort of pride ourselves is that both Ratmir and myself, we come from enterprise background. We know how to work with enterprise customers, how to build big companies, working in partnership with the channels, which is another big thing which kind of SaaS made people forget. And that's what we're trying to do here. So with the arrival of Peter Guagenti, who's our new CEO, he has tons of experience in the AI space. He worked for companies that were doing that quite successfully in the development space, software development, I mean. And basically, we are targeting the enterprise market. We're building a very strong professional services slash consulting team because,
Nice.
again, what we realized is that people don't really know where to start.
Okay.
Everybody's talking about AI. People have budgets, but they don't know, okay, what do we do? So we help them find, we don't do grand strategies. We help them find 2, 3 use cases that bring huge ROI right away. We build them and then we sort of expand from there. And that's our strategy, at least for the upcoming year. Then we will see.
And just quickly as well, just to so people understand, it's a SaaS, but is there also an on-prem version that can be deployed as well?
Exactly. We
That's
are, we are
interesting.
focusing on on-prem. Yeah. We
Okay.
started with kind of a mixed mode, but we realized that for enterprise customers, and especially in Europe, actually, on-prem is a magic word. So this is what we are moving
Yeah,
towards.
that's cool. But the SaaS platform will still be there as well to basically build out. And then what you're talking from an enterprise perspective, when you get customers, obviously from a data privacy point of view, maybe they
Right.
want to connect to a local LLM of their own that they've trained. It makes more sense to have the platform deployable on-prem as well. So it's a full
Exactly.
hybrid setup.
Yeah, I mean, for SaaS, initially we started like full-blown SaaS, but since we're switching to this enterprise-friendly architecture, we will keep the SaaS version, but it will be more like what WordPress is doing, right? So you take
Yeah,
your own instance, you put it somewhere in the cloud, you can work with it. So
that's
that's the
pretty
idea.
cool. And I think that's also quite a unique outlook on it as well, right? And maybe a bit of a pointer to where things are going within this world at the same time, where again, everyone talked about SaaS being the end game and everyone was going to go SaaS because it was just better. But, from the way that and this mirrors what people are thinking about with just hybrid cloud in general, is that on-prem is actually more as important to consider for larger businesses because of, again, all the compliancy, all the regulation, and just the data security, because we are talking about, very serious data that is going into it and very serious work. You mentioned financial institutions. So, this isn't just asking a chatbot to get the weather.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, hey, this has been fantastic. Just finish off by, if you were going to sum up in a minute, where people should go for Integral, what they should expect, and what you guys are doing in the next 6 to 12 months. Just finish us off with that.
Yeah, so basically, again, we are moving very much towards simplifying even further how to build agents because, again, our DNA, our initial vision remains. We want everybody to build as many agents as they want to help them, in life, in business, anywhere else. And actually, this is something I encourage everybody to start thinking about, because if you're not using AI agents in your life and job today, you are becoming more and more at risk of being left out. It's just you have to. There is no other way around it. And whether you use Integrail or something else, up to you. Of course, we encourage you to use Integrail because we love it and believe it's good. But in general, just go there. No matter what
Awesome.
you do AI. Yeah.
Great stuff. Great finish. Hey, thanks for being on the show. It was a great episode. As I thought, Integral are going to do some great things. Looking forward to seeing where you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony.
Hey, just as a reminder, thanks for listening to this episode. Stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to highlight companies and technologies shaping our world. Don't forget to follow us on social media at GTWGT Podcast and visit gtwgt.com for more great content and all past episodes. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. Please spread the word, and if you feel like it, drop a review. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.